Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. On this special episode, I'm thrilled to be sharing an excerpt from one of the most popular Remarkable Retail podcasts of our third season, where my podcast partner and best-selling author, Steve Dennis, and I host a blockbuster panel featuring three of the most experienced and insightful veterans of the luxury world. Katz, former president, CEO of the Neiman Marcus Group, Steve Sadove, former chairman and CEO of Saks, and Oliver Chen, managing director and senior equity research analyst at Company. We cover a lot of territory, first trying to align on a working definition of what luxury really means today and how luxury was evolving pre-COVID. Then we shift into what's next, including our dream team's quick takes on luxury re-commerce, the role of in-store experience and the importance of multi-brand retail, online and off, sustainability, exclusivity, storytelling, and more. We wrap up getting everyone's view on why it's so hard for legacy brands to innovate and whether .com spinouts make any sense at all. Let's listen in now.
Well, I'm very excited to have some old friends, the three wise people of luxury retail. We'll get a little bit more perspective on each of them, but thanks for joining us. And why don't we just jump in, and if we could ask everybody just to introduce themselves and give us a little bit of your background, though all three of you are legends in the industry. Probably most people know you, but just in case they don't, Karen, would you mind starting?
Steve, thanks for having me. I'm Karen Katz. I'm the former president and CEO of the Neiman Marcus Group. I was at Neiman Marcus for 33 years and led the company from early days through its digital transformation. And today spending time on public company boards, advising entrepreneurs in the consumer space with a focus on sustainability, and doing a lot of philanthropic work.
Happy to be here. This is Steve Sadove. I'm the former chairman and CEO of Saks and was a frenemy of Karen's, and we worked the industry during the same period of time. And my career was both consumer goods and retail. I chaired the National Retail Federation, and I currently sit on a bunch of public boards, do philanthropy as well, and some private equity and venture investing.
Thanks so much, Steve, and I'm really thrilled to be here with Karen and Stephen. My name's Oliver Chen. I'm globally ranked as one of the top luxury stock analysts. I'm also an adjunct professor at Columbia Business School, and I grew up in Natchitoches, Louisiana, in a retail family.
This is especially exciting for me because, as many in our audience will know, I worked at Neiman Marcus a long time ago, worked for Karen briefly, and I do remember the days when Karen and Steve were, as he mentioned, frenemies, but it's nice that we can all get along here years later. But anyway, let's jump in. I thought maybe just kind of level set the discussion, maybe a couple of broad questions I'd like each of your quick take on. There are a lot of definitions of luxury, I think, and just I'm curious, when we talk about the future of luxury retail, what do you include in luxury? How do you think about luxury as a category or a sector? Steve, you want to kick us off?
Well, it's a much more complicated question than you might think, because everyone's definition of luxury is different. And, to a lot of our audience, we're thinking about very high-end luxury, the Louis Vuittons and the Guccis, et cetera. But more broadly, I think the accessible luxury, the Coaches, the Kors of the world are luxury. And I would include experiences and products that people feel good about, that they're aspiring to at both the higher and moderate end. So it's not just about very high-end luxury.
All right. How about you, Oliver? I guess you have to have a definition, at least in terms of what you cover.
Yeah, Steve, as I think about luxury, I think one point is time, and time is the ultimate luxury in terms of retail really enabling people to reinvest their time and think about how to spend meaningful time. Second, echoing what Stephen said, is experiential and emotional. There's a very strong emotional component where luxury goods can transcend price, and they should, and they will if they're executed really well. Those are features. And then I think we have a real evolving sense of luxury with streetification and versatility and health and wellness. Where these are important new chapters, and luxury is also constantly changing, in my opinion, and needs to be culturally relevant.
Karen, how about you? Disagree? Agree?
Well, I think Oliver and Steve said it extremely well. I would only add that I think luxury is in the eye of the beholder, and we each hold what is luxurious to us differently based on the life experiences we've had and the way we want to live our life. And so I think it can be, as Steve started out, a very challenging and very broad answer to what is luxury.
All right, well, fair enough. Well, so the next kind of broad question, and then we'll dive into some more specifics. And really, I'm thinking here, pre-COVID, obviously, we've seen a lot of digital disruption across all of retail. I guess we can argue as to exactly when it started, but certainly way back when I was working at Neiman Marcus, we were in the early days of getting that started. Saks, I think, was certainly investing in e-commerce and a lot of things digital. But what would you say has been the arc of disruption that's affected the industry? What's most important, and what were you seeing as important before we really entered this more recent period?
Yeah, so I mean, I do think that, as you said, this digital transformation, in my mind, in luxury has been going on for a long time. And although some people were not on board with this pre-COVID. Neiman Marcus, we launched our website in 1999. So, I mean, it's been a long time that not just Neiman's, but many other people have been selling luxury goods online. I think that the big change, and this is certainly something that I personally felt passionate about, was I think in luxury retail, brick and mortar, what was unique about the experience of shopping in brick and mortar was the way luxury retailers put an emphasis on developing relationships with their customers and clients. And I think the big change in luxury retailing during COVID was how to take that idea of developing relationships from brick and mortar and developing relationships online. And that change of going from transactional luxury to, relationship luxury in e-commerce. And I think that takes the form of online personal shoppers, live streaming, any of those kinds of things. I think that was a big change that was starting to take place pre-COVID, but I think really launched forward during COVID.
Yeah, I'd echo where Karen's went with it, that this is not that it's new during the pre or post COVID. It's an acceleration of what has been going on for quite a long time. My guess is that, just take overall commerce. Overall commerce went from 12% of commerce to 18% of commerce was digital during the pandemic. And you saw probably a 3-year acceleration of the rate of growth underlying it. And I think that in the luxury sector, that was even more so because you had to make the change because it was so dependent on that experience in the store, and transforming the online experience for personalization, analytics, and creating that unique experience really was accelerated.
Yeah, in addition, I would say, the connected experience has heightened in importance, meaning linking desktop to mobile to in-store and making sure that that's seamless. I also think this idea of context and personalization and how to personalize at scale is really important. And then community building and storytelling. And the interesting thing is the evolution of storytelling in-store, digitally, through apps, through gamification, and transforming what that means with technology. But stories, heritage, this emotional innovation connection to the creative artists and artisans behind luxury, that's really important as well.
Karen and Steve, you both kind of gave me a layup for the next question. And the next question was going to be around, what I see often described as innovation in the sector has really been around a long time. Karen, you and I launched Hudson's Bay e-commerce in 99. You launched Neiman Marcus in 99. Many of these things that are sometimes called innovation, they've been around a long time. Tell me about, Karen, what you see or view as genuine innovation. Maybe it's because of the COVID era, or maybe it's because of a crisis, but is there anything you could call out that you've seen as customer-facing innovation from the sector? And then, Oliver, I'll go to you and say, well, if not, what's holding everyone back? Why does it take a crisis for luxury brands and legacy brands to innovate? Karen, you go first.
Yeah, so I think it's a really good question. I'm not a believer that there's any silver bullets, and so I don't think that there's any one thing that changed, dramatically because of COVID. I think, Oliver always expresses it well. All of these, different complex ideas that are finding their way to kind of, mainstream. But I will say, pre-COVID, I think a few things were becoming very, very evident. And I think that, this was on the list of things you wanted to talk about. I think re-commerce, luxury re-commerce is here to stay. And I think that it's becoming a large part and will become even larger part of the luxury landscape. And I think how everybody thinks about that is going to be on people's mind and on their priority list moving forward. So I think that that's one thing. I think that there was a lot of talk in the years leading up to COVID about the kind of the death of multi-brand. And in fact, I think one thing that has happened during COVID is that the strength of multi-brand has proved itself again and again. And although I think department stores are, in one place in their very, very, very long life cycle, I think what still matters is that they are multi-brand places. And I think, the landscape, whether it's, Net-a-Porter, Essence, Matches, My Teresa, Revolve, any of those kinds of companies, they're all multi-brand. And I think the customer still wants that if really good retailers know how to edit for their customers. So I'll stop with that. But those are kind of two, big things that I like to spend a lot of time thinking about.
Oliver, let me pick up on that thread a bit, so to speak, and literally and virtually. I was reading the EY Global Customer Index last week, and it talked about a customer that is more thoughtful. And they described, I think, something like thoughtful consumption, more thoughtful buying, and that dovetails into what Karen was just saying about the resell. How do you view, from your lens, the resell market and luxury's role in that as conscious consumption? I've heard it also described.
Yeah, we're really enthusiastic and excited about that. And one of the themes we have is less is more. Does anybody really need any of this? And what about no retail and retail as a service? The other issue which we see is we're living in a world where everything's available to everybody at all times and places. So what really is exclusivity? So we look at business models like Supreme, like Kith, like the RealReal, StockX, and others. And this all embraces different forms of both experiential as well as the closed loop economy and rethinking the afterlife of a good. So there's many issues this opens up, but one of the big opportunities for all of retail is post-purchase. What happens? What's the thread composition? And it's better for society if you're not actually making a new object. We're living in a generation and a time where Gen Z and Gen A cares most about mission and purpose, and that directly ties into storytelling as well. So we're going to see increased and heightened significance of supply chains and pollution and fabric platforming and dyeing as being major issues.
Well, Steve, I'm going to ask you the hard question now. Taking this and your own thoughts on the future of the industry, where are we going? I mean, there's lots of online competition. You've got more conscious consumption. You've got, I don't know whether it is less or more focus on discretionary goods. You've got younger customers that may or may not want to go to the sector. Have we seen the last luxury department store built in North America and Western Europe? As you get your magic 8 ball or you put your prognostication hat on, where do you see the luxury industry going, and are you optimistic for the future in the short, medium, or long term?
Oh, I'm very optimistic about the future of luxury. I just think that it's going to continue to evolve and be different, that there's a lot of fragmentation, there's segmentation. When you say, is there going to be another department store? What are we defining as a department store?
Good question.
Because you've got marketplaces that are evolving. You have segmented marketplaces that focus on luxury. And those are going to continue to evolve. You have the role of concession, which has become increasingly important in the luxury space in the department store. But my guess is you'll see an evolution of the concession within the marketplaces. affiliates in some ways are evolving and becoming more important. So I view all of these, whether it's resale, whether it's rental, whether it's the marketplace, the brands controlling their own destiny so that they're presented in the way they want to be. All of this is a part of the ecosystem, and there is a role for the traditional, luxury department store. It may evolve also and be different. You already see the changes going on at Saks with the separation of the .com and the full line business. But you're going to continue to see changes. But I think the net of it is the consumers love brands. They love luxury. They're aspirational. And Karen's right. It's in whatever your own definition is. And I think that the luxury space is a very good place to be.
Well, it's a magic question, right? What is a department store? We did a whole episode on that.
So I want to come back in just a second on this spin out separation question. But just going back a little bit to where Michael was going around innovation. We talk a lot about this on the podcast. Why does it take a crisis for retailers to innovate? But also, why do legacy companies seem to struggle with being more innovative? And Karen and Steve, since you've both run large, well-established retailers, what's your perspective, I guess, from a cultural standpoint or from a process standpoint? What does it take in your mind for these larger, older retailers to get out there in front of these trends, rather than, as I think we see a lot of times, maybe you disagree, but my observation is a lot of times these retailers often respond too late to some of the most interesting innovations, or they're afraid to compete with themselves, or they don't invest enough. But what's your perspective on whether you agree with that and what some of the struggles are to making it happen in a more established retailer?
Well, I guess I can jump in. If think about it, an Amazon started as digital first. A legacy company like Saks started as brick and mortar first. And and you have people who run these companies who have grown up in the either the digital or in the brick and mortar world. To change and get people to think differently, to change a culture is not an easy thing to do. Everything's converging right now. The brick and mortar is moving to the middle. If you're a DTC company, you're opening up stores. If you're a brick and mortar company, you're moving more digital. And it's a focus. It's the people who are running the companies, how they were trained and developed. Culture change isn't an easy thing to do. And, clearly crisis creates the opportunity for disruption. But to get a big company like a Macy's or a Neiman's or a Saks to change overnight culturally is one of the most difficult things to do. And it's a lot easier when you start, if you're trying to play in the digital space, if you started as a digital company.
Sure.
I would also just add that I think the choices of the way to innovate these days are bountiful. And I think that large retailers, as they're having hundreds of ideas coming their way, it's up to some group of people to try to prioritize which ones will have short, near, and long-term impact on the business. And I think that process in itself in a large, complex company is just not easy. And, frankly, I'm on a very large healthcare board, and we have the same challenges. It's very large, many opportunities in terms of how to innovate the business. And I think the real challenge is how do you prioritize which of those innovations coming your way really are going to make the impact for the consumer. And I think that, part of that is bureaucracy. Part of that is, you've got this large business that, it's not quite as easy to take risk with. And I'm not here defending department stores by any means, but I think that the innovation is, like I said, it's just bountiful. There's so much interesting, exciting things going on. And I think it's increasingly challenging to try to figure out which of these innovations should be prioritized within a company.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. All right, so final question, and I almost hate to ask this question because I've spent, I guess, a good chunk of my career working on channel integration issues, multi-channel way back when I was at Sears, multi-channel when I was at Neiman Marcus, then it's omni-channel. I call it harmonized. But anyway, it seems like the one thing that it seemed like retail learned over the last 20 years is that thinking about channels is not so helpful. The customer is the channel. It's a blended, blurred world. Yet we have this pressure that some companies are getting to spin out their .com. Saks has already done it. Oliver, I'll start with you just in terms of the Wall Street perspective. Is this just kind of a misunderstanding of how retail works? Is it a moment in time where we're seeing these very high valuations for digitally native sort of brands? What's your take on it? And then we'll talk about whether it makes sense or not, or under what.
Steve, I think we're at an interesting junction where you have a lot of heritage retail, Macy's, Kohl's, and others, which are rapidly transforming to high digital penetrations. Trading at fairly modest to lower multiples relative to 100% digital models trading at, double the PE valuation. So there is a dichotomy there. There's opportunity. Each public company has to strictly look at what maximizes shareholder value. And what does that mean? It means, how do you maximize the stock price given different scenarios? And this can happen. Separations may or may not be able to happen depending on execution, which means setting up the appropriate rules and organizational structure across different divisions. Anything's possible. That being said, we believe in bricks plus clicks. Can you still do bricks plus clicks with or without two companies? Yes, you can.
300 service agreements or whatever.
300 to 500, and also just understanding the economics of each channel. And the customer doesn't need to know or doesn't want to know that this is happening. So those are all execution/leadership, hardware, software, supply chain, infrastructure questions as well.
Karen or Steve, you willing to take on the elephant in the room? I don't know, Steve, if you want.
I'm happy to take it. I think that every circumstance is different, and you have to decide what's right for an individual company. I think what was interesting, and as Oliver said, you have to start with the consumer, and the consumer has to have and wants a seamless experience. So anything that you do to separate companies, in theory, moves you away from that. So you've got to find a way of executing so that it is seamless to the customer. I think that the Saks example was an interesting way where they were able to, at a valuation, it was a $2 billion valuation, raise $500 million that allowed them to make some investments in their .com business that they otherwise hadn't done, whether it was in technology or inventory. And so if there was a reason for that made sense for why they needed to do it in order to be able to get the resources, maybe, you can make an argument. It makes a lot of sense if they're able to deliver on a seamless experience for the consumer. It doesn't make sense for somebody. And by the way, we talk about luxury marketplace. You can make an argument that a Saks as a luxury marketplace, there's a reason for that, and you can argue it for Neiman's as well. But it doesn't make sense for everybody. And some companies, Macy's is being pushed to do it. I don't know that it makes sense for them or not, because they're already a top 10 internet e-commerce player, and they're putting adequate resources, they believe, I think, into the business. So if there's something unique that it allows you to do, it may very well make sense for a specific situation.
All right, Karen, last word goes to you.
Yeah, well, I'm a believer that you got the consumers at the center of it. And if you can make it work and still service the consumer, I'm all for it. But, you think about 300 to 500 service agreements. We were just talking about the complexity of these large businesses. It interrupts kind of how much innovation you can get done when you're making a business even that much more complex. But I live with the consumer, and if we can make her happy, then we're doing our job.
Well, the one thing I think we can say for sure is Alex Partners and the investment bankers will be successful pursuing this strategy. Whether the customer and the retailers will like it ultimately, I guess time will tell. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us. It sounds like we're all pretty optimistic about the future of luxury, and just got to keep staying on top of the customer, staying on top of the innovation. We'll put some links so people can learn more about what Oliver, Karen, and Steve are up to. And thanks for joining us. Hope you have a great holiday season.
Happy holidays.
Season's greetings, everybody.
If you like what you heard, please follow us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast platforms so you can catch up with all our great interviews. Subscribe so that just automatically shows up. Tell your friends, and also in new insights and new episodes will show up every week. So tell your friends because that will help us share the word, the good wisdom. Now, be sure and check us out on our new YouTube channel. Not so new anymore. We got a couple episodes up there, and just look for Remarkable Retail.
And I'm Steve Dennis. You can check out more of my work at my website, stephenpdennis.com, or on Forbes, or on Twitter. And please check out my second edition of my book, Remarkable Retail, How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption, available just about everywhere books are sold.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, producer and host of the Voice of Retail podcast and a bunch of other stuff. You can find me on LinkedIn, learn about me on meleblanc.co. All right, Steve, great episode. Look forward to chatting again next week. Be safe and have a great rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Voice of Retail. Be sure and follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts so you don't miss out on the latest episodes, industry news, and insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating review, as it really helps us grow so that we continue to get amazing guests onto the show. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of LeBlanc Company Inc., and if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at meleblanc.co. Until next time, stay safe, have a great week.